You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today is June 22nd, 2025, and this is episode 319 of Lighthearted. Our guests today are Gloria Coder and Lorna Pierce. This will be part one of two parts. Gloria and Lorna are the daughters of the late Seamond Ponsart Roberts. Seamond was the daughter of a longtime lighthouse keeper in Massachusetts, and she was the author of the book, Everyday Heroes, the True Story of a Lighthouse Family. After some time on lightships, Seamond's father, Octave Ponsart, started his lighthouse keeping career as an assistant at Great Point on Nantucket. He spent 5 years as the keeper at Dumpling Rock in southeastern Massachusetts, and he and his family barely survived the hurricane of '38 there. Seamond was born in 1940 and took her first steps at Dumpling Rock. After a brief time at Butler Flats Light in New Bedford, Ponsart became the keeper of Cuttyhunk Light off Cape Cod. Cuttyhunk was the family home of Octave's wife, Emma Cornell Ponsart. He remained keeper at Cuttyhunk until the light was discontinued in 1946. He then spent 11 years as keeper at West Chop Light on Martha's Vineyard. Even though Seamond spent just a few years as a child at Cuttyhunk, she always considered it home because of the family's connections there. The island is still very special to the family, as you'll hear in the interview. Seamond passed away in December 2023. A memorial gathering was held on Cuttyhunk in July 2024, and this episode was recorded this past April. Let's listen to part one of my conversation with Lorna Pierce and Gloria Coder, remembering their mother, Seamond Ponsart Roberts, now. I am speaking this afternoon with Gloria Coder and Lorna Pierce, who are on opposite coasts, but are sisters, and both daughters of a friend of mine, a longtime friend, and author of a book we're going to be talking about. So we'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, thank you both for doing this today. Yes. I really appreciate it. This is great. I've been wanting to do this for a while, so this is great. So Gloria, you're in Upland, California, is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what do you do there?
I work for a nonprofit. We're just a little less than 100 people. And I am currently the project manager for CalVIP, which is the Violence Intervention and Prevention Program. And I'm also the project manager for the Public Health AmeriCorps students, and I'm teaching them how to become community health workers.
That's fantastic. And I saw, I think on your LinkedIn, it also said director at Coder Camp, Coder. Is that after your name, or is that computer coding? What does that mean?
That was after my name. It's when we were homeschooling our children. And so we called it Coder Camp. And so we homeschooled the kids for a couple of years and to get them through the junior high years and get them kind of a head start into high school.
Great. So Lorna, I looked at your Facebook page, and among other things, it says that you are fluent in both English and Klingon, which is very, very impressive. I'm really impressed by that. I don't know anybody else who speaks.
I'm a legal assistant. I work for a law firm here in Florida. We have about, 15 offices.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that for about 25 years. Right now, I'm currently working with the young associates. And these are either associates that have less than 5 years, or they just got out of law school and passed the bar. So I'm kind of trying to do the work for them, but at the same time, kind of help them through that transition period from law student to lawyer.
Mm-hmm. So,
yep.
Yeah, that's important work. You're in Bradenton, Florida, right?
I am in Bradenton, Florida. We're about maybe 25 minutes south of Tampa.
Okay, so let's talk about your mom. First of all, I'm going to ask both of you. I don't know who wants to go first. Say your mother's first name for me.
Seamond.
Yep, Seamond.
Seamond. That's how I say it, and I believe, because I say that because I thought that was how she told me to say it, but I hear so many variations on that, and I'm sure you do too.
Well, the thing is, with her living in the South for a good period of time, and especially after we were born, a lot of people in the South just couldn't say Seamond, so it was Simone or a couple other, definitions of Seaman.
Seaman, yeah.
Like that. So, but yeah, it's Seamond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's in the book, Everyday Heroes. She said she kind of liked hearing people say Simone. That sounded kind of fancy.
Yeah.
So it's again Seamond, of course. And could one of you tell the story of where the name came from?
There was a boat, I believe, called the Nansemond or something. Grandpa liked that, and Grandma liked it. But since Mom was born on Dumpling Rock, they decided instead of that, they named her Seamond because she was child of the sea.
Yeah.
And I think it was because I had something to do with her almost being born in a dory. But yeah, it had something to do with that. They just liked the name Seamond. It was a made up name for Mom. And
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen anybody with that name other than Mom.
I don't think there ever will be, unless somebody's named for her. But
Yeah, that's
otherwise,
true.
yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
And Margold, I'm not sure where that came from. I don't remember where Mom said they got her middle name from.
mm-hmm.
So,
Like the flower marigold.
well, it's
Yes,
Margold, Margold. Yeah.
Without the I in the middle.
Yeah. So maybe it's the way
But
Grandma said it.
that was what Grandma, her mom loved marigolds. That was her favorite flower, but she always called them marigolds. And so she thought she was spelling marigold for her middle name, but it got spelled Margold. So that's where her middle name come from.
Yeah.
So one of a kind first name and one of a kind middle name.
Yes.
The two of you are, I believe, pretty close in age, something like 3 years apart. Is that about right? Yeah. So you grew up in similar time, obviously. And when you were kids, did your mom talk about her childhood at the lighthouses much?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All the time.
All the time. Mom never got off that island. As long as she was alive, Mom never left Cuttyhunk. That was anytime she would talk about her life in general, it wasn't, I don't think it was anything after we were born, but it was always about Cuttyhunk and where she came from and how proud she was of her father and how hard, the life was there. But she loved it. She loved it. So.
Yeah. I want to talk more about Cuttyhunk shortly. But Gloria, anything you want to add to what Lorna just said?
You could feel if Mom was asked where she grew up, that was the question she loved to be asked more than anything. And she lit up and had that passion and would tell anybody and everybody that would listen. And so that's where her fondest memories were growing up, whether it was a Cuttyhunk or West Chop, anywhere on Martha's Vineyard. She just lit up and it brought her such joy to talk about.
I'm wondering specifically, are there any stories that kind of stand out for you that she would talk about when you were kids?
I remember her telling us stories about her father, Octave, and how when she had to go to school and there were like some soggy places that her dad brought several boards and would put them down and they'd cross over them. He'd do that and just cross over the boards. And that was one of the ways that she had to get to school when she was like on Cuttyhunk because some of the places were so soggy. And one time when they were doing that, there was a snapping turtle on the rock that she just stepped to, and she started screaming about the snapping turtle. And other than that, there were a lot of stories. She adored her father, and she told me all the ways that her father basically spoiled her because she was a child of later year parents, and her dad built her the swing set that's in some pictures. When she wanted to do like pottery, he made her a little firing oven. When it was her birthday, things were scarce, so he modeled her birthday candles into little lighthouses for her. Anything that she wanted, her dad would try and make Seamond happy. So we heard lots and lots of those kind of stories.
When you say him making things, it makes me think of the one time I was at West Chop Light Station with your mom when she served as an elf from the Flying Santa. We'll get to that in a little while. But we were in the cellar. She was giving me a quick tour of the place. That's where my dad had his workbench and would make his, I think he made ship models for one thing. Is that?
Yes.
I think so. Yeah. Lorna, any stories that spring to mind for you?
Oh, my goodness. There was when it's one of the funny ones that I remember. There was a dead whale that washed up on Cuttyhunk. And Grandma insisted then, and Mom went with her, they were going to go down and pilfer this whale carcass.
Yeah.
They were looking for ambergris. And Mom was talking about, she says, Mom was out there just digging around. And she says, and I was out there and the smell was horrific. But, that was supposed to be because they didn't have a lot of money. They were living, on the Coast Guard salary. And so they had to make do with whatever they had. But that one, and also Grandpa used to trap muskrats, I understand. Mom would sometimes go with him when he was out checking his traps and stuff. They were just together all the time. If Grandpa went somewhere, Mom went with him, just because, that's how close they were and everything. Yeah. But that, and let's see, always the story about the flying Santa. Always the story about the flying Santa.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a few minutes for sure. Yeah.
And Lorna, with the muskrats, she needed a new coat.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember that part of it. And so Grandpa sold the muskrat skins to get her a coat. And so she always called that coat that she had her muskrat coat. So
even though it was not actually made out of
no.
Made out of muskrats, yeah. I think you got a coat from the Sears and Roebuck catalog, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, a lot of these stories are in the book, of course, and I just loved hearing them from her myself. So, of course, she was born when her father was keeper at Dumpling Rock off Dartmouth, Massachusetts.
Right.
And not long before she was born, they had survived the hurricane of 1938 there.
Yep.
And barely survived it. The story of that, I'm sure some of our listeners have read that. I think that story has appeared in the Keeper's Log, the U.S. Lighthouse Society magazine, and a Lighthouse Digest and other places, and in the book, Everyday Heroes. Did she talk about that? She liked to say that she learned to walk on the rock where her parents had nearly died a couple of years earlier. So was that something she would talk about?
Occasionally, she, I guess it's because she was so young, but she would tell us about how the big boulder that washed up and went into the house.
Yeah.
How when the storm happened, that her sister Betty and Grandma and Grandpa were literally, the roof was coming in on them, and the dog had to like swim around in the water, and they almost drowned basically, and that the tower was shaking so bad they were afraid it was going to crash in on them.
Yeah.
But that it was a miracle that they all survived, especially the next day when they went out to look at everything.
Yeah.
But it had basically almost, I was really surprised that they let them stay up until Mom's birth, because it was apparently just a hair's breadth away from being condemned, and probably should have been condemned, or the Coast Guard just didn't realize how bad it was, because Grandpa kept everything going. So they really didn't, he was not a person to complain, and that they just did their jobs and they just made do with what they had. And so I'm sure it was like maybe an inspection came up and came out and went, "Oh my God, people, you can't stay here." Mm-hmm. So, let's see, the hurricane was in when 38.
Yep.
Mom was born in so it was 2 years later. 2 years later after Mom was born, before they condemned the thing and moved them off of Dumpling Rock. So there's pretty resilient people.
Yeah. And they tore the building down right after that too.
Yeah, I mean, somebody was going to die in there, and they're lucky nobody did.
Yeah, absolutely. 7 people died at lighthouses in that storm on the southern New England coast. I can believe that. Yeah, including one in New Bedford. Yeah.
Mom used to talk about the light ships too a lot. Mm-hmm. Especially the Vineyard Sound, about I guess the stories in the book, Gloria, isn't it?
Yeah.
About
the hurricane of 44. Yeah.
She was 4 years old when that happened, but she had such vivid memories of that, right down to, and that was one story that even as Mom aged, it never changed. You know how sometimes as you get older, you don't remember things quite the way you maybe did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But that was one story that never changed. And so I think that was just like etched into her DNA, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really stands out for me, that story. She, even like you say, she was like 4 years old, but according to the way she told the story, she helped her dad, who basically spent the night on the top of the lighthouse. Mm-hmm. I think she brought him coffee for one thing, I believe.
Yeah,
I can believe that.
And they were friends with the crew of the Vineyard lightship, and you can see the lights of the lightship from Cuttyhunk, and they actually saw the lights kind of disappear in the storm, and sadly they were all lost. So that
all but one. all but one.
Oh, and he was on shore, right?
He was on shore.
Yeah.
And I've never, mom would tell you the same thing over and over. That grandpa was up in the top of the light and telling her to watch for the lights. And when they went out, he said, "Oh my God, Seamond, the men in the iron boat, they've gone to the bottom."
Yep.
And, it just would give you chills every time she told this
Yeah,
story.
it makes me emotional now. Every time I've read that, or had such an impact on her. So the emotion she had when she would tell the story. So do you both of you remember your grandfather, Octave?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was a
Mm-hmm.
sweetheart.
He was a sweetheart.
Yeah. And, you could see, with my memories of going up to Massachusetts to visit them in their house up there, he was so kind. And I can just see why mom has always had just this loving relationship with her dad. I mean, he was just so kind. We went up there and grandma has always been kind of sick or sad a lot. But grandpa, like Lorna said earlier, he didn't complain. This was just life. But we were out there and we woke up the next morning and there was probably like a foot or two of snow. And he went and cleared the snow with a shovel. And we had little rain boots on, and it was so we could slide back and forth on the ice. He did that. And then he took us down to the pier, and we got to pick out live lobsters. And he bought me some fake jewelry and those golden chocolate coins. And when we got back, we took pictures of ourselves, and Lorna and I still have those pictures. And then one of the other things he did was he goes, "We're going to have some clams." He'd got fresh clams, and they steamed them open on the radiator for us. But he was always a very kind man. Now, Lorna may have Lorna's a little bit older than me, so she might have some more memories, but.
Well, he actually bundled me up because I wanted to go out and play in the snow. Gloria and I being 3 years apart, I guess I was like 6 or 7 by that time. And so I went outside thinking, oh, I can go play in the snow. Here's this little California kid trying to play in the snow. And he kept telling me, be careful, be careful. Well, I turned the wrong way off the porch and I fell into a snowbank, and I'm in over my head, which, for a kid that's never been in snow, I'm screaming, and Grandpa comes out and he's laughing and he's trying to grab me by the back of my pants and pull me out of the snowbank. And he said, "See, Lorna, I told you it was deep. Be careful."
Yeah.
He also tried to teach me how to make lobster pots, how to do the netting. I wish I could remember how, but he would take out the big wooden needle for doing the nets. And we would sit there in the living room, and he was trying to teach me how to do that. So
yeah,
I think he missed being on the Lighthouse. I think he missed that part of his life. And I think when he had his heart attack and they medically retired him, that just broke his heart, because he was so proud of being a lighthouse keeper. And I think for Grandma too, I mean, I personally don't remember my grandmother ever being well or being super happy. But I think a lot of that was just that, something inside of her was broken after her son died. But
yeah, I
think leaving the Lighthouse really had a profound effect on her. And it just, it just took something that was light for them and just took it away from them. Yeah. So that was their whole lives, That's what made them unique and made them special. And when the Coast Guard retired him, it took away that uniqueness. Yeah. And so I'm glad Mom got to tell their stories in your book.
Yeah, I am too. So they lived in New Bedford in those days, is that right? After retirement? Yeah, he lived in New Bedford before he became a lighthouse keeper, right?
Yeah.
The family, they were Belgian, right? And
absolutely.
His family, I think, was it his parents, I think, had come from there?
It was Desiree Ponsart. He had come from Belgium with him and another brother. And I guess there's quite a few children, but they were 15 and 16 years old, I believe. And so they came, and, of course they worked in the woolen mills and stuff, because that's what they had been, weavers, and learned that trade in Belgium. So it was I think it was Desiree's parents that actually came, because Desiree was Octave's father, and he was born in, can't remember which year, but so, and then after they came, some more came, and things like that. I'd have to recheck my stats on who's who, though, to be sure.
Yeah, I can remember her saying that I think there was sort of a enclave, would use that word, like a bunch of Belgians who lived in that area and worked in the mills, at that
Yes.
time. So let's get back to Cuttyhunk, okay? You've talked about how important Cuttyhunk was to her. Maybe if you want to say a bit more about that, and I think you guys still have feelings about the place, even though you don't visit there very often. But why does Cuttyhunk mean so much to the family?
I guess it's the root of where we come from. Without it being where we were born or even necessarily where we've been a lot, it's kind of the base of the tree that we come from. That was so much of Mom's life and Grandpa's life, and they had cousins and uncles and brothers and everything like that, and that was just where they come from. Yeah. So if you wanted to start where our family comes from, I would almost say Cuttyhunk. I wouldn't even say Belgium. It's where Seamond got started, and then the rest of it is us. So it was a joy to go back, and this past year was my first time there. I've never been there before, but being there, it was almost like I could see all the things that Mom would talk about. Yeah. Gloria's been there more often than I have, so she probably has a lot deeper feelings. But now that I've been there, I want to go back. Yeah. So it's a magical little place for being as remote as it is. It's magic, and the people there are just unbelievably awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been there. I've been on the island twice, Gloria, and both times you were there at the same time. So,
yeah. And I think what Lorna says, it's kind of back to our roots, and it's more on Grandma's side of the family. The roots are there, the Cornell side of the family, because that's where they came from, City Island, New York, down to Cuttyhunk. And as I went and looked through all the historical records and stuff I could find, that first time you and I were on Cuttyhunk, I found out how much the family ran the island. And it was really interesting to see that my grandmother, Emma, she was like the tax collector. Her brother was like the garbage person. Everybody had some kind of little job, and the whole island was almost ran by all the Cornells there. And they were the ones that fought in the war, and their names on the memorial plaque in front of the Historical Society. And we heard a lot of those stories about Grandma's side of the family when I was growing up, about how her grandfather had gone over to Pennakees Island, which had been previously the leper colony, and he was in charge of kind of the nature of the place. And Grandma always worried, this is kind of a funny thing, but because they had gone over there and lived over there for a while as he was the caretaker of the island, there was seagull eggs, and they used to eat seagull eggs. And she worried as she got older that because of the leprosy, she was afraid she was going to get leprosy because she'd eaten seagull eggs, and maybe the seagulls had gone to the graves of the people who had had leprosy. So she was always, that was one of her concerns I remember about Grandma, is, her concern over eating the seagull eggs and if she was going to get some kind of disease from that. But we heard so much about her brothers, her sisters, and just the whole family, and the hurricane that came through there and wiped out their property because they were right on the waterfront. And those are the kind of things that I remember from, her side of the family telling us stories about. So it was a lot of roots. And then, Grandpa came over there, and then they ended up meeting, and got married. But a lot of the roots were there, and then Grandpa came and they established more roots there.
Yeah. For listeners who might not know, both Cuttyhunk and Pennakees are in the Elizabeth Islands chain off of Falmouth, Woods Hole on Cape Cod, off the southwestern corner of Cape Cod. The islands extend down between Vineyard Sound and Buzzards Bay. But really fascinating group of islands. Nashan, or Nashan, as they say out there, I think, being the largest and having a tarpaulin cove lighthouse too.
Well, Pennakees was the last leprosarium on the East Coast before everyone to either to Hawaii or to Carville, Louisiana. Yeah. So that was the last place, and that's how Great Grandpa got to be, that he was the gamekeeper there and was supposed to keep people out of the old hospital buildings and also keep poachers off the island. So that was his job.
I know there's been some interesting articles about Pennakees. I think it hasn't been that many decades since that was moved off of there, right?
No, I think they actually built a boys' school out there in the last 50 years. It's kind of a rough, kids that need extra hands or something like that. But some kind of boys' school. So
Yeah.
it's been a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. All those islands in general, and Cuttyhunk probably most famous as a fishing capital for many years.
Striped bass.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So after her first few years at Cuttyhunk, where her father was the keeper at the Cuttyhunk Lighthouse, the Cuttyhunk Lighthouse was torn down, was dismantled at the time they left, right? Because they were afraid it was going to fall over the cliff. Where it stood, it's still not gone over the edge of the cliff. So many years later. But then they moved to Martha's Vineyard, West Chop Lighthouse in Vineyard Haven, and spent 10 years there, I believe. And that certainly was an important part of your mom's life. But seems to me she did talk about Cuttyhunk more than Martha's Vineyard. But Martha's Vineyard must have a special feeling for the family as well, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's where she started, she started to become a young woman. She, made friends. She went to more of a formal school instead of the one-room schoolhouse that was at Cuttyhunk. She learned to drive a truck, things like that. So, her adventures just kept getting bigger once they got over into Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, she wasn't as, she talked about how she wasn't as isolated, as at Cuttyhunk. And so one of the things Mom always loved to do is read. And so she always told stories about when she was out at Cuttyhunk. She didn't care who visited, please bring me anything to read. And she goes, sometimes it was repair manuals, but she would read whatever they would bring. So once they were on Martha's Vineyard, she had access to so much more reading material. And they were a little bit more civilized with electricity and things that they had not had on Cuttyhunk. So it was a little bit new and a little bit upgrade in life and facilities and things like that.
Sure.
No more outhouses.
No more outhouses.
Well, Martha's Vineyard's a lot bigger than Cuttyhunk. It's a really large island and relatively closer to civilization for sure. Maybe a little too much, a little too many people in the summer now, I think. Maybe not quite so much when she was there. There's so many great stories about West Chop, too, that she told me that are in the book, including how she had, a record player she would bring into the lighthouse tower and play her Elvis records in the lighthouse. And the assistant keeper, it was Sam Fuller, I believe, would yell at her. He didn't like that at all. But she liked the echoing.
Mom was quite the Elvis fan.
Yes.
Yeah. The day Elvis died, Mom was actually in the house, and I heard her just sobbing in the house. And I'm like, what happened? Oh, Elvis died. And I was like, oh, okay, Mom. So, she actually, she had a close encounter with Elvis Presley in Memphis, Tennessee, when she was an operator there. It was when mobile phones first came out. Not like what we think mobile phones, but she was a switchboard operator, so everything had to be plugged in and out. And when you got a call on a mobile phone, you had to verify the number and all that for billing purposes. So she gets this call and she's like, well, number please. And he's like, ma'am, I don't know my number. And she says, well, can you tell me your name and I'll look it up? And he said, this is Elvis Presley. And she was like, no, it's not. No, And so after much back and forth, he actually sang to her a little bit on the phone. And so she's screaming, doing what young women would do back then, going, ah! And the chief operator came over and it's like, what is wrong with you? And she's like, it's Elvis. It's Elvis. So everybody was trying to plug in on the same call. But that was Mom's Elvis story. It was one of her better Elvis stories.
Yeah, that's in the book. In fact, I was just, skimming through and remembering that just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
She loved to tell that story. She did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What a thrill that must have been.
Yeah.
So since we're kind of on the subject of both Cuttyhunk and West Chop, because it relates to both places, but let's get back to that Flying Santa story. And I'll just briefly tell the story, which is probably, the history of the Flying Santa. I know a lot of our listeners know that the Flying Santa was a tradition that went back to 1929. A pilot in Maine started dropping presents from his seaplane to lighthouse keepers and their families. Edward Rowe Snow, the very popular historian, picked it up later and did it for over 40 years. still done by helicopter to Coast Guard stations today. So what happened was when they were at Cuttyhunk, Edward Rossno, the Flying Santa, dropped a doll in a package, a doll chosen especially for Seamond, and the package hit a rock. The doll was broken. She was heartbroken. Between that year and the following Christmas, they moved to West Chop on Martha's Vineyard. And the following year, for the first time in the history of the Flying Santa, Edward Rossno rented a helicopter so he could land on Martha's Vineyard and hand your mom a new doll. And, the Flying Santa history is really interesting. There's all kinds of good stories. That is the number one story in the history of the Flying Santa, which is about 100 years now.
Yeah.
And I know the whole, that episode and the Flying Santa in general, I think, had a special place in her heart. And I don't know if either of you want to comment on that.
That is a story that we heard so many times growing up. And I remember when I was little and I got a doll for Christmas, I especially got told that story again. Let me tell you about my doll. And she told us about how the doll had been broken. It hit the rocks. And this is another time when her daddy came to the rescue. Her daddy could fix anything. And he ended up gluing that doll's china face back together. And she just put some bandages on it and would call it her hospital dolly. And so she did tell us that the next year, she went to West Chop, and she was surprised as all get out when the helicopter landed and out came Mr. Snow and handed her a doll. And how excited she was that this one was not broken. And, we just heard that all the time. And, recently, as I was going through Mom's things, I actually found the actual Lighthouse postcard that it's from West Chop, and it was sent to Mr. Snow. And it says, "Thank you for the lovely doll. I hope you have a nice Christmas. Best wishes, Seamond Ponsart." And it's from the Cuttyhunk Lighthouse at West Chop. And it was written by her mom because she wasn't big enough to write, but it was on behalf of her. And it's sent to Edward Snow in Winthrop, Massachusetts. So that was just a prize thing to find. But Mom just really, every Christmas, that story was probably retold and retold as we were growing up. And she just thought the world that Mr. Snow, cared about her so much, and that broken dolly, that he would do that. It was just a wonderful time.
Yeah.
She was actually amazed that somehow Santa knew that they had moved from Cuttyhunk to West Chop, and she worried about that a whole lot. But that story never changed with Mom, ever. The little details that you, like I said, as you get older, you remember things different. That's one story that never changed. Absolutely never changed.
In my collection, I have a copy of a card. It's not really a postcard. I think it's just written on like a index card from your grandfather, Octave, to Edward Rossno, thanking him for the doll also. So I think there are multiple thank yous sent to him.
Well, that's why she was so thrilled when the Flying Santa group invited her to come be the elf many years later. I actually have the cape that she wore as her elf cape. It's Christmas tree skirt now.
I have pictures of that because I met up with them that day.
Yeah. So, she was just, I think that was just the highlight of her year that year.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what year it was. It was the early 2000s, 03, 04. It was somewhere.
I'm not sure if it wasn't before then.
I think it was 03 at the earliest, but
it was before they moved out of New Orleans. I do know that much. So yeah. So, but she loved that. She absolutely loved that.
Yeah. So I took the ferry over to Martha's Vineyard and met the Flying Santa at West Chop Light and saw your mom hand out presents to the kids, Coast Guard kids, children of Coast Guard families at West Chop, and she was so happy. She just seemed overjoyed to be there. And as I said, time was very limited because they had to get back on the helicopter and get to the next stop. But she got to quickly go through the house that she lived in as a girl there and give me and a few other people a quick tour. But it was a thrill to go in there with her because I think there had only been like one other time she'd been there since the family left there.
Yeah.
So that was great. So so listeners know, a children's book was made about that story as well, called Love from the Sky, the story of Seamond and the Flying Santa. And I originally had the idea for that, and I tried to write it myself. And then people told me, "Well, that's not how you write a children's book." So we had other people do it. But I'm very pleased that was done as well. So you have the book Everyday Heroes about her experiences, but also the children's book. It's nice that story is being preserved in multiple places.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom told me that one of her favorite lighthouses, if not the favorite, was Point Bonita in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. I think it's in Sausalito. And I was rereading this. Lorna, she said that you were in second grade and were doing a report on lighthouses, and you were living in California, right, at that time?
That is correct.
So you got up and went to, you all visited Point Bonita Lighthouse. And Gloria, you were in kindergarten at the time, she said. So I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
Do you? Do you both
Yeah,
remember that trip?
we remember that. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sounds like mixed, quite a trip. Well,
yes.
I don't know how deeply you want to get into that, but the lighthouse itself, I know she really loved.
Yeah, Mom decided, she found out about the light, and our dad was in the Navy at the time, and he was on the Hancock. It was an aircraft carrier that was out of Alameda, and he would be gone sometime for months and months and months because this was back during Vietnam. And so Mom would try to find things for us to do, like go to parks or go to a zoo or something like that, just to get out. And she decided to take us to see Point Bonita Light. And it was scary to me as a kid because you had to go across this bridge to get out there. But she assured me that we were not going to fall off.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she really enjoyed doing that. We also, she was able to sit there and, to my little 7-year-old mind, say, oh, well, that's what this is, with the light, and this is what they see, and that kind of thing. And this was a lot like Cuttyhunk and that kind of thing. So that was my first introduction to being around a lighthouse. I had never seen anything like that before. And Gloria was like 4 or 5 years old.
About 5, yeah.
Yeah. So I was probably closer to 8. But, Mom liked to, she liked to expose us to what she remembered. She also was big into history.
Yeah.
After we left the Point Bonita Light, she wanted to go, she used to, I don't know how to explain this. Mom liked to go walk around in cemeteries. Okay. She liked to.
So do I.
Yeah. She liked to walk around in cemeteries, and she liked to do this thing that was gravestone rubbing. She'd get rice paper, charcoal, and because, even if the face is gone, you can still get an impression of what's on the stone.
Yeah.
So we went to Crockett, California after we left Point Bonita. And Mom sees this old derelict, I remember this vividly, a 3-masted schooner that was out off a cliff. And she's backing up, trying to take a picture, and she fell into an open grave. Yeah. So she's screaming, I'm 8, Gloria's 4 or 5, and we don't know how to get Mama out of the gravestone, out of the hole and everything. And I think somebody else heard her, and maybe it was the caretaker or something, but he's like, lady, you can't be walking around out here like this.
Especially backwards.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And backwards. And apparently they had a little grave robbing happen while they were there. So we did that. But after that, then, she just wasn't cowed by much. Instead of just getting in the car and taking us kids home, next stop was going to a chinchilla ranch. She wanted us to go see chinchillas. So this was just how Mom would do things. She would just move from one activity to the next. But that was the Point Bonita trip. Started off at a lighthouse, ended up at a chinchilla ranch.
Yeah.
So
it was quite a trip, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Telling that, you've probably both seen the video that's been going kind of viral lately with a bunch of pallbearers falling into an open grave. Have you seen that? Do you know
I have not seen that, but oh my God.
I have not seen it either.
I've seen it a couple of times. There's several guys, lowering a coffin into a grave, but the ground gave out around it, and they all fell in. Luckily, nobody was seriously hurt.
Oh my God. Was it Florida? We get sinkholes. I could see that happening in Florida.
Yeah, right. But anyway, so your mother might have been, I don't know if she was the first, but she's not the only person who's fallen into an open grave.
I was just going to say, I think what Lorna said is about us going to Point Bonita. Mom loved Point Bonita. And it was, I think, both of our first real lighthouse that we got to. And, Mom was pointing out the spiral stairs, and I remember all these things. And, she took my picture by it, and she said, I'm like 5 years old. And then when I later moved to California and we were heading up in that area, my mom was, make sure you take your daughter to Point Bonita. So I took her there, and I told her I'd come here when I was about her age. And so it was really, like Lorna said, Mom told us, that's a Fresnel lens, this is that, and, would just tell us some more stories. So, but that was both of our first experience with being at a real lighthouse.
Yeah. I mean, Mom helped save a lighthouse in South Carolina. And I mean, I was little, I don't even know if Gloria was born then. But there was a newspaper article about her, going out and doing letter writing or whatever. But she helped save that lighthouse there, because that was another one that was going to be condemned.
Was it Morris Island?
Morris Island, yeah, that's
Morris
right.
Island.
Yeah. Back in 2015, I drove the whole West Coast by myself from San Diego to Seattle, and then went up into British Columbia. I photographed over 60 lighthouses. One of the very few I missed was Point Bonita. I was supposed to go there. I messed up. I went with an old friend. I hadn't seen in many years. Took too long. Couldn't make it there. Stuck in traffic. Traffic can be bad around there.
Absolutely.
So I never made it. I feel like I've got to go back to that area to see Point Bonita Lighthouse, because that made me feel so bad, because I knew it meant so much to your mom. So that was a disappointment to me. Here is a little from the beginning of Seamond's book, Everyday Heroes. Quote, I am and always will be a lighthouse keeper's daughter. I had the good fortune to be born to a different kind of childhood. I didn't recognize this fact back when I was small. I thought that everybody lived like we did on our little island of Cuttyhunk, Massachusetts, which in itself was a life apart, unquote. I was lucky enough to know Seamond for around 25 years. I only met her in person a handful of times, but we corresponded via email, letters, and phone calls. I thought of her as a good friend, and Seamond was that kind of a person. She was everybody's good friend. I know that some of our listeners corresponded with her, and those of you who did, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I was honored to help bring Seamond's stories to the public in the book Everyday Heroes. Part 2 of this interview will be heard in episode 320 next week. Be sure to check out uslhs.org to learn more about all the great things the U.S. Lighthouse Society does. Until next time, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and keep a good light. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.